You keep telling me to make it, yeah, to the spot where we would stay lit, and finish bottles never wasted, yeah, cause that's where I'm from.
Hello and welcome to an episode of On Campus. This is Ashley Ching, Solano County's Miss Fairfield. Today I'm joined with a special guest, Mrs. Pati Navalta Poblete. Thank you for coming here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Pati is a Bay Area journalist, nominated twice for Pulitzer Prize, and she's the executive director of the Robbie Poblete Foundation. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about what happened? You had lost a son at 23.
Sure. Yes. Well, I was a longtime Vallejo resident. We moved there when I was probably in 4th grade, and so I'd been living there for 3 decades before we decided to move to Fairfield. And it was maybe a year after we moved to Fairfield that Robbie was shot and killed in Vallejo. It was September 21st, 2014. And I would say for a few more than 2 years, I was unable to return to the city just because it triggered so much anxiety in me and I had so much PTSD. And I sat down to write this book that I have now, and during the course of writing the book, it came to me that maybe the way to heal and the way to return to the city that was my home for so long was to create a foundation where I would be returning now to help the community. And the reason I couldn't go back, there's that stretch of Highway 80 between Fairfield and Vallejo. It's only 20 minutes, but the day that Robbie was killed, there was bad traffic, and so we were stuck on that stretch of highway. And I'm just thinking, what's happening with my son? What's going on? And so every time I went down that stretch of highway, it would reignite that anxiety. And I just remember writing in the book, maybe if I return toward hope and not toward tragedy, that would help. And so I created this foundation, the Robbie Poblete Foundation, with the goal of reducing gun violence. Number one,
a gun buyback program, right?
Through the gun buyback program. But what occurred to me, when I thought of, okay, what is the gun buyback? These are people who are surrendering their firearms who no longer want them. And that helps because a lot of the crime that is committed with firearms that are stolen from homes and from cars and otherwise.
When criminals break in,
yes, people break in, they look for guns right away. But for me, that wasn't really the full story. The full story was transformation and healing. So I asked what happened with the guns once they're collected and dismantled, and I was told that they're just destroyed and recycled or
just
whatever.
throw them away.
Yes, and so I had the idea of repurposing the metal and distributing them amongst artists and having them give this metal new life. Okay. A lot of these firearms, especially the ones that I'm getting now, are linked to crimes. So to give them a new purpose and a new life where now it's about inspiring and educating rather than taking a life.
And what do you do with the guns? You melt them? And
they're not melted.
Okay.
So they go to a private company and they are decommissioned, meaning that they're dismantled just enough so that they're inoperable. And they can never be put back together again to work as a functioning gun. So when I get the pieces, you can tell that they're parts of a gun. Mm-hmm. I'll get a part of a grip or a part of a barrel or something like that, but they can never be recreated as a gun. So then I created the Art of Peace, which is we put out a call for artists and we told them that your job basically is to transform tragedy into hope, and it was their vision, how they wanted to embody that. And I looked at proposals from around the world, which was shocking to me because when I created Art of Peace, I thought Solano County, but what I got was Germany, Philippines, Florida. They came from around the world, and each of the submissions had their own personal stories of why they want to do this project, how gun violence has impacted their lives.
I can't miss this event. It's happening in Vallejo next
May
month,
11,
right?
Yeah, May 11 we'll be unveiling that. And the third component of the Robbie Poblete Foundation, because my son was learning how to weld at the time he was killed, is vocational. Because for me, a big realization for me when I looked into the backgrounds of the 4 men who were arrested in my son's case, they had been in and out of the criminal justice system since they were young, very young. And I couldn't help but thinking, well, what if they had learned to weld like Robbie? What if they had learned to be a carpenter or work with sheet metal or be an iron worker? Would they have taken that same course in life, or would they have a good paying job where they can support themselves and their families and not have to resort to crime? So the third component is our vocational program, where we work with ex-offenders, we work with kids in continuation schools, and kids who know they're not going to go to college but want some option when they graduate, and put them into paid apprenticeship programs. So that's really the three-pronged approach for reducing crime and violence for the Robbie Poblete Foundation.
And I think you also represented your foundation at the recent 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination in Atlanta. You just came back from that.
Yes, I just got back 2 days ago, and it's I can't hardly explain the experience, because 4 years ago when this just happened to Robbie, I never thought that I would even leave my house again. I never thought that I could even work or function or care about anything. And so to be standing in the middle of the King Center next to Reverend Bernice King, who is the youngest child of Reverend Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, shoulder to shoulder and sharing our stories of our loss was surreal to me, and I kept thinking, how did I get here? And I keep thinking, my son brought me here.
And there were other parents too.
There were 3 other mothers. They were all from Atlanta. And then there were 2 students from the Parkland mass shooting. And we were all invited to speak on the 50th anniversary of his assassination at the King Center. And the whole purpose there was to take firearms, put them in a furnace, and melt them down to make shovels. Right. And once those shovels were made, 50 shovels were made from 50 guns. And we planted 50 trees throughout Atlanta. And the first one was at the King Center.
That sounds very touching, very powerful.
Yes, it was.
And what you're doing now is you've written a book that's going to publish next month as well. Do you want to show it to us?
Yeah,
A Better
so
Place.
this is called A Better Place, and this is a book that when I did have PTSD and I couldn't go back to Vallejo and I didn't want to leave my house, it first started with me writing letters to Robbie and asking, I had so many questions. Why did this happen? Why were you there? Who were these men? And it became very difficult for me to continue writing those letters because I knew I was never going to get an answer back. And so I started writing this book. And the reason was, when in my most distraught phase, I was going to bookstores and I was looking for books where other people in my position went through this and what did they do. And what I found were they were either very religious books, and at that point I lost my sense of faith and I didn't want to hear about this is what God wanted or anything like that. I didn't want to hear anything about religion. And then the other one was how-to books, and I didn't want that either. Mm-hmm. There is no how-to. Every person grieves differently. So what I wanted to do was write a very raw, very real story about all the emotions I felt and what I did to get through it, not as a how-to, but more of, you're not alone. Mm-hmm. I've been through the worst of the worst, and this is my story of how I'm trying to make it out. And that's what I was missing when I was looking for a book. And so I'm hoping that's what this can provide for other people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for a copy of it. I look forward to reading it.
Yes.
I understand you're also a journalist. You're a longtime Bay Area journalist, nominated for 2 Pulitzer Prizes. Can you talk more about your career there?
Sure. Actually, my first job out of UC Davis was as a copy editor at the Vallejo Times-Herald.
Right.
And I was making $9.75 an hour, I remember. And,
What year?
That was 1993.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Yes.
That's really good.
Yeah. Is it? I didn't think so.
I think so. I hear what they're making now. That sounds great.
That was my first job. And then from there, I went to the Alameda News Group, which was a newspaper group that had several newspapers, including the Oakland Tribune. Oakland Tribune no longer exists, but Fremont paper, several papers throughout the Bay Area. So I became the news editor for the Daily Review, which was the Hayward paper there. And from there, I went to the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat, which is owned by New York Times. And then from there, I landed at the San Francisco Chronicle.
Wow.
And so, there were several jobs there, but I loved it. I loved telling the stories. I loved getting people's perspectives out there. And when I was working at the San Francisco Chronicle, I wasn't a journalist in the sense that I was just reporting news in a non-biased way. I was a columnist and I was an editorial writer, meaning whatever position I took, I had to take an opinion on, and I had to convince my readers in some way that that was the opinion to have.
take an action.
Yes,
Okay.
for a call for action. And so what led to the Pulitzer Prize nominees was I wanted to take on foster care reform in California, and I knew that there were a lot of challenges in the foster care system in the state. And so for 1 year, I followed the issue. I got to know one specific foster care youth at the time. I got to know the court system. I got to know foster parents. I went into group homes, and I put together a list calling for very specific legislative action.
Fantastic.
And after that year-long series, Governor Schwarzenegger signed all the bills that I was pushing
Wow.
for, and it was a direct connection to our editorial series, and that's what led to the Pulitzer Prize nomination.
What did you major in?
English.
English. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
English. Yes, but I didn't know what I wanted to do yet.
Mm-hmm.
And but writing always came naturally. Telling a story came naturally, and of course, I never imagined that I would use those skills for my son's story. And it took me a while. I didn't know if I wanted to put myself out there. I'm used to advocating for other people and telling other people's stories. I'm not used to laying my own soul bare like that.
Well, we all enjoyed your keynote at the Women of the Year luncheon where you shared your story.
Thank you.
And I think you had said that you're planning to scale the Robbie Poblete Foundation from Solano County throughout the state and maybe even nationwide.
Mm-hmm. Well, so bear in mind this foundation is barely a year old. We got our official 501c3 statement from the IRS in the end of February 23rd, 2017. 2017. So we just passed the 1 year mark. When I sat down and thought about what I wanted this foundation to look like, I had a 3-year plan. And year 1 was all about community building, getting buy-in from multi-stakeholders. Year 2 was what I envisioned for launching the buyback and then possibly the Art of Peace program. And then year 3 would be vocational and then scaling to different counties. What happened quite unexpectedly is it all happened within 10 months. And I had counties calling me saying, we want your program and we want to do this. So Alameda County the Alameda County District Attorney's Office has adopted our Art of Peace program. I'm on their committee and they just went through their selection process. We had the city of Richmond contacted me. We had a buyback there, which was supposed to be a year 3 plan where we go to other.
That's amazing.
Yes, and then now I have other counties. We're talking to Oakland about having a buyback there, and then Atlanta came, and I got questions about whether we would bring it to Georgia as well. So I think the potential is there. The demand is very much there. The will from the public is there because gun violence is such a huge issue right now, and they're longing for these types of programs to help reduce crime, raise awareness, even using art to make profound statements about what's happening in the country. It's just, how am I, this mom in Solano County, how am I going to be able to keep up with that demand? So that's really where we are right now.
Great. What call of action do you have for our viewers on how they can prevent violence?
To prevent violence, well, I would love if we could get more people involved in our foundation, just selfishly speaking, just because we do so much in the community and we always need volunteers. So our website, www.robbiepobletifoundation.org, has a list of all the events we have, and that's all the programs. Gun buybacks, we always need volunteers. Art of Peace we're unveiling the Solano County one on May 11. I'm going to replicate what I saw in Atlanta, where we're going to shut the street down and have victims of gun violence and survivors of gun violence put firearms into the furnace and watch them as they transform. So we'd love to have volunteers or even just participants come to that. And vocational, we have career fairs and school events all the time. And so just to raise awareness about these opportunities in vocational, just to come out and learn what that's about. The next one is April 20. It's all trades, hands-on demonstrations at the Carpenters Training Center here in Fairfield on Chadwick Road.
Okay.
So that's a good event to have. In terms of reducing gun violence, we're fortunate that we have a lot of programs. There's the Brady campaign. You can get involved with that. Just go on the website.
I've not heard of that. I have to look that one up.
The Brady campaign calls for a number of legislative changes in terms of gun control, so always get involved in that. Look for your local leaders who have a say in gun reform at the state and the federal level and
Was it
push for
Mike
those changes.
Thompson who had
Mike
reviewed your
Thompson.
work?
Yes, Congressman Mike Thompson is an early supporter of ours. He contributed to the gun buyback. We're going to be partnering with him on a number of other events this year. But, I like him a lot because he is a proud gun owner. And it's not, when you talk about guns, it's so polarizing. I get attacked a lot, even though our gun buyback is purely voluntary. I'm not trying to encroach on anyone's Second Amendment rights, but because it's such a polarizing issue, there's a lot of discourse that has yet to be had because there's a lack of understanding. So Congressman Mike Thompson is a good supporter because he knows both sides. He owns a gun. He's a responsible gun owner, but he's also for sensible gun reform. He's also for gun safety. And in my mind, who would argue against finding ways to reduce gun violence? And that's really the common ground that we all have to operate from.
Patti, it's been so wonderful to have you here. Your story is so inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Again, this is Ashley Ching, Solano County's Miss Fairfield, with On Campus at Solano College Sports Network. Remember, respect yourself, teach people how to treat you, and know you can walk away.